Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new lecture of research methods. Today, we will be focusing on interviews as a qualitative data collection method. So by the end of this session, you will be able to evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of using interviews as a data collection method. You will be able also to understand the different types of interviews and its application, and to familiarize yourself with the process of conducting interviews, and to learn how you can ask effective questions. So as I mentioned, interviews is one type of a qualitative data analysis. So just a reminder why we need to use or to collect qualitative data. So to remind you, quantitative data, generally they focus on facts. So they are trying here to generalize your findings. That's why you try to collect data from large number of participants. So you will have large samples, and generally you might use a hypothesis if you want like to test the relationship between variables. So here the meaning derived from the numbers. On the other hand, qualitative, we used it when we want to focus on meanings, or we want to focus on the experiences of people. So that's why it tends to collect data from small number of people. So we have a small sample, and we try to investigate in depth the perceptions and perspective of people. So the meaning here is derived from the words. And there are different data collection, qualitative data collection methods, which include interviews, focus group, and observation. So today we will focus on interviews, and the next lecture we will be focusing on focus group and observation. So what is interviews? So interviews, it's a purposive discussion, or it's a professional conversation between two or more people. And when we say it's a conversation with a purpose, we mean that this purpose is to collect research data by encouraging the interviewees or the participant to reflect on their experiences and to explore the meaning and explore their opinions and perspective. So it's important here for you to understand, or to give like the opportunity to your participant to listen to their perspective, or to their opinions. So why we use interviews? What are the advantages of using interviews? So interview is a flexible and adaptable way of finding things out. So interviews provide you with rich data to uncover the underlying motivation, like beliefs, attitudes, feelings that individual has towards a certain topic or certain subject. And maybe you couldn't gather those like in-depth experiences through surveys. So interviews, they involve extensive questioning of individual respondent to explore the reasons underlying attitudes and behavior. So interviews, they enable you to ask questions of why and also how. So you will get in-depth understanding and answers, and it also like delve more deeply and enable you to ask sensitive questions. In the survey, for example, you might not be able to ask like certain topic because of their sensitivity or confidentiality. However, if you use interviews as your data collection method, you will be actually able to ask such a sensitive question. Also, interviews can be important to give voice to underrepresented group. So let's say, for example, if you have a focus group and you have like the employers and their employees in the same focus group in the same room, so like the employees, they might not be able to answer certain questions because of the power of their employers, because they are concerned that they might answer questions which might put them under risk. So interviews can be more helpful to give like voice to those people who are under representation. However, there are also disadvantages of using interviews, because sometimes you need to travel to the interviewee location or country or like company in order like to have interview with them face-to-face, of course. So you need to cover the travel expenses, and also the calls, if you need to have like phone calls. But with technology, it became more efficient for you, like to use technology in order to conduct interviews, for example, using social media or email. And we will discuss this later. So interviews can be time consuming because the process of conducting interviews, that you need to set up the interview, that you need to select your participant, to ask them if they are happy to participate or not. You need like to conduct the interview itself, which also takes time. You need to transcribe the interview and then analyze and report them. So comparing to surveys, interviews, they are considered relatively more time consuming. Also, sometimes it's difficult to obtain cooperation from potential interviewees. So also this might be time consuming for you to try like to grant the access or like the consent of your participant in order to talk to them. Also, interviews, it doesn't have like the dynamics of a focus group, and it's also more subjective than quantitative or more than surveys, because like it depends on the researcher interpretation of the findings, which might be subjective. So there are different types of interviews. We have structured interviews, semi-structured interviews, and unstructured interviews. And your choice of which one of type depend on your research question and the overall research purpose. So for example, the first type is the structured interviews, and here you will have like a predetermined or a standardized set of a question. And we can see this type of interviews in like job interviews. So when you go to a job interview, so usually the employer, they ask the same questions to the all candidates. So all the candidates, they are asked the same questions, and their answers, they are rated on the same scale. So here you can use the structured interviews in the descriptive or explanatory research. And here the main interaction is to explain the question. So let's say sometimes like you want to reach like a higher number of respondents, or you might feel that your question might be difficult or hard to understand by the participant. So you prefer like to conduct your survey as a structured interview. So you just sit with your participant, or maybe using the phone call, and ask them like the questions, that the list of questions that you already have, and you just like write there or choose the answers of your participant. So the advantage of this of using structured interviews, that you take control over the topics areas and the interview process through predetermined and standardized set of questions. And also, as I mentioned, it might help like to boost up the response rate, because you as researcher, you are the one who are filling who is filling the question with your participants. So you ensure that your participant will answer all the question, which maximize the reliability and validity of your findings. And also it's easier for you like to code and analyze and compare the data, because you have like the same questions and you have already like similar measures of the answers. However, the main disadvantage of using a structured interview, that it lacks the depth, because you ask the same question. So it's the same disadvantage of using survey. So it constrains the interview and might like omit data that may be useful for your research. The second type is the unstructured interviews. And here it's like open conversation on a given topic. So usually we use it in exploratory research. So here you have just like a list of like broad themes, and then you ask the participant, and based on the answers of your participants, you try to ask them more questions. That's why it's interview led, because the interviewee or the participant, he or she is the one who lead the interview. So based on the questions on your interviewees, you try to ask them further questions. So you don't have here like a list of the question. And usually we use this type of interviews in exploratory research where there is like limited literature on the topic, or it's hard to anticipate or plan for the research or for the data that you need to collect. So here the interviewees, they have like the complete freedom in their response. However, it needs like a trained interviewer, at least someone, a researcher who is capable of keeping the conversation going. So you need a researcher who is experienced in conducting the interview with. And then since the interviewer has the whole control over what the questions to ask and how to evaluate the answer. So this shifts actually the focus toward the interviewers implicit theory. So might be the interviewer actually might like lead the interviewee questions or answer to a certain direction, which will inform or enforce or confirm their assumptions or their implicit theory. So here there is a risk of bias. So in order to overcome the disadvantages of both types, the unstructured interviews and the structured interviews. So the most common type of interviews which used usually in research, it's the semi-structured interviews. So here you prepare like an outline of the interview topics, or you have like general questions. So you have to work out like a set of questions, like list of themes or like issues to cover, what we called interview guide. So you prepare it in advance. But you also can add more questions, or you can like leave other questions in your research, in your interview guide based on the interview. So here the interviewee or the participant or the interviewer is free to modify the order or the wording of the questions based on the answers of their interviewee. So how you can conduct interviews, or what is the process of conducting interviews? So first of all, you need to define the purpose. So what is your research question? What do you need to know about? What data that you need to gather? So your research question will be your starting point before you go to the field and start conducting your interviews and collecting your data. Then you need to decide what is the method for collecting your data through interviews. Do you want to go for face-to-face interview? Do you want to have like telephone interview or online interview? So you need to focus or to decide which method. So is it easier for you to do face-to-face and to travel to the participant location, or you prefer telephone or online? So it can, like, if you want to use online, it might be like less costly for you. And because of COVID-19 maybe, and like the travel restrictions or social distance restriction, you might like try to avoid like face-to-face and prefer to go for online and telephone. So you need to decide that. Then you need to decide the sampling. Who will be your participant? Who they are? What criteria that you need to focus on? So for example, in my PhD research, I was focusing on entrepreneurs or like people who have businesses, either male or females, for more than 3 years. And this criteria, because I wanted my participant to reflect on their entrepreneurial journey since they started until the time of interviews. So what are the challenges that they faced or they are still facing, how they were able to overcome them. So if I have to focus on entrepreneurs who just started their business, they will not be able to reflect on their experience and like give me information about how they were able like to navigate the challenges and become resilient. So my criteria was, or my sample or participant, entrepreneurs who have businesses in certain geographical location, and also they are operating their businesses for over 3 years. So you need also to decide who are your participants that you need to approach. Also, you need to contact them, to contact your potential participant either by email or sending them a letter or maybe call them, and you need to ask for their participation. So you explain the purpose of your research, you explain what is expected from them, why do you want to talk to them, why do you think that they are the most appropriate participant for your research project, how you can give like how long the interview will last. If you are planning to give them like any rewards or benefits, you need also to be clear with that. So you need like to seek their consent for participating in your research. Then you need to draft interview guide, which will help you while you conduct the real interview. So just you prepare like an opening statement covering the purpose of your research, talking about like the confidentiality and the right to withdraw, and also include section like for face sheets, like for example, personal information such as the name, the age, the gender or position of the participant. You need like to have like the interview guide to be like logical, structured logically, but also, as I mentioned, in semi-structured interviews, you have the flexibility in the order and in the wording of your questions or your topic. And also you need to give consideration on how you can ask effective question, and we will discuss that later. Then you need like to pilot your interviews. So you might choose like 2 or 3 or maybe 4, depending on your research questions and the number of like participants that you need to approach. Then you can conduct like a pilot interview with them, and then try to ask them if the questions were clear to them, if there is something that they didn't understand, if they believe that because they are the expert, if they believe that the questions were like sufficient or enough for your research, or do they think that they need to answer to add more questions. Or you as a researcher, you can also judge that from like, you can do like initial analysis and decide that there are like questions which might not be relevant to your research, or other questions actually or information that you gathered during the pilot interview which are like more relevant to your research. Then you revise your questionnaire or your question interview guide, and then you conduct the real interview. So you need to know who you are going to interview, when and where as well. You need to confirm like the ethics for the interviewees, their anonymity. You can also advise them how you are planning to use and the results, and of course explain the purpose of your research. Maybe you can record the interviewees, you can record the interviews, and of course you need to ask for the permission of the interviewees before you start recording your interviews. And you need to use a good quality recorder and ensure like to have like your interview in a quiet location, and you need to keep it on time. Then you need to transcribe when you finish your interview. You need to transcribe it, so you need to have like it into words, which will help you with the data analysis, with doing the comparison. And we recommend you to do the transcription as soon as you finish the interview, because you still have like the interview, it's still fresh in your mind, so you will be able to add your notes or your reflection, rather than just delaying it, like let's say after 1 week or like 1 month when you forget what was the interview about. And then you start the data analysis, and this will be discussed in next lecture or in the coming lectures. So what are the sequence of the questions? Of course, we said like there is a flexibility with semi-structured interviews, but usually interviews, they have like introduction, the main body, and then closure. So the introduction is very important to set the interviewee at ease. So you include or introduce your project. You have, as we said in the ethics lecture, you have to be honest about the project, your project, what is the purpose of your project, what is the aim, why you are doing your project. Also explain to them ethics, their right to withdraw, protection from harm, how you will keep their confidentiality and anonymity. Also, you need to ask for their permission if you are planning to record your interview. Also ask them if they would like to see the transcript after you do that. Also, you need to give them like how much will the interview last, and ask them if they are happy to record the interview. So you will start your interview with easy questions. So questions such as personal questions, such as like their background, their education, their work experience, like any general question maybe about their business, for how long they have the business, who are their like target, maybe their annual income. So just to try to ask them like general questions so you can put them at ease, and also to warm them up. Then after that, you will ask, it will be the main body of the interview. So you will start to ask your question, or the question which will help you to answer your research question. So you will have, as I mentioned, an interview guide. So this is an example of interview guide, where, as I said, you will have like a paragraph where you thank the participant and give them like just a brief description about your project. And then you will have like themes, general themes, and like broad question within these themes. Mostly they are open questions. So this is an example of interview guide. Then you will have the closure. So you will thank your participant for their contribution and for their taking the time to talk to you. And you can ask them if they want to add any further information, or you might ask for relevant documents, for example, the company reports or like images of their product. So you can ask them in the end of the interview. Also, you can ask them if they know other participants who might be appropriate for you, like to talk to them, which we call a snowballing sampling strategy. So you can ask your participant in order like to put you in contact with potential participant that might be able to contribute to your research topic. So when you conduct the interviews, it's important to ask effective questions. So here we will give you like some tips and like guidance on how you can ensure like asking the right and effective questions. So first of all, you need to ask open questions. So for example, if you will ask, is brand image important to your marketing process? This is a closed question. So the answer will be either yes or no. So here you will lack the depth, and you will still lack the understanding. So when you ask a question, you might try to ask it, what role does the brand image play in your marketing process? So you need to ask open questions, right, rather than close the question, because it will allow the participant to express their opinions and to elaborate on the answer, not just only yes or no answer. Also start your question with how, why, what. So for example, why did the organization introduce marketing strategy? How has corporate strategy changed over the past 5 years? So such like open questions will enable the participant like to explain further and reflect on their experiences. Also, you need to ask questions which are relevant to your research question. So is the question necessarily for your project or for the evaluation, or you just like asking the question without any purpose, just like to have interview with the participant? Also try to avoid asking longer questions, because the participant might forget part of the question. So they will answer you like part of the question and they forget to answer the other part of the question. Also try to avoid the double barreled question. So try to avoid the question which have like two parts or two aspects. So for example, if you ask, what do you think about current pop music compared with that 5 years ago? So in that case, you are asking, here you have two questions in one question. You have two aspects here. So it's better to break down the the question into simpler one. So for example, you can ask first, what do you think about current pop music? Once they answer you, you might ask the second question, can you recall any pop music from 5 years ago? And then you ask, how do you feel they compare? So in that case, they already answered you the first question, and in your last question, they will answer you how it's compared 5 years ago. So try like to divide or to break down your questions into simpler ones so you can listen to the or have the answers to all of your questions. Or to try to avoid the double negative question. So for example, when you ask, is it not right to not segment the market? So here you use like two negative words. So try to avoid using two negative words because this might be confusing to your participant, or your participant might misunderstand your question. So in that case, they will give you like inaccurate answer or meaningless answer, which can impact on the validity of your findings. So you need to ask yourself also, can the question be easily understood? So you are not talking like to specialized people or like expert people in your field. So when you ask a question, try to avoid using like theoretical concepts or like jargon. So try to ask like simple question, and this you can evaluate it during the pilot interview. So during the pilot interview, try to evaluate the question. Ask your participant, do you think that my questions were easy to understand? Where you find it difficult to understand my question? Also try to avoid leading the interview or asking questions which will lead the interview. So for example, you ask, you don't mind having a female boss, do you? So this is as you are trying to lead the participant and guide them to answer what you want them to answer. So it's better to ask this question like, how do you feel about having a female boss? Also try to avoid asking biased question. So try to avoid like appearing like to share or welcome the participant view, because in that case you are leading the participant or you are leading the interview to the direction which can confirm your assumptions or theories. Also, probing. When you do interviews, it's very common to ask probing questions, and here you are trying to get the participant to elaborate on their answers, or for you like to have more clarification and understanding when you feel that there are like more interesting information or things that your participant can add. And usually we have exploratory probes, so we ask what, why, and how questions in order to follow up initial responses. So there are very general tactics that you can use. So for example, mirroring probes. And here when you are repeating back all or part of what your participant or interviewee has just said, or maybe you can use like periods of silence, and this will encourage like your participant to rephrase what they already said or expand on their previous answers. So you might use like phrases such as, oh, that is interesting, and repeat what they already said. Maybe you can ask them directly, tell me more about it, or anything more, or maybe you ask them like, could you go over that again? Or maybe you can ask them, what is your personal view in this? So try also to probe questions from your participants so they can like elaborate further on their questions. Here's general advice when you conduct the interviews. So make sure that the interviews take place in a quiet meeting room. So it will not be disruptive, and your interviewee or your participant can keep like answering your questions, and you will not disturb like the flow of the interview. Also try to schedule the interviews to allow enough time. So usually interviews, they last from 1 hour sometimes it can be 2 hours. Sometimes if the interviewees are so talkative or they have like very like rich experience, it might last 3 hours. So try to plan or to schedule your interview in order like to ask all of your questions. But when you conduct the interviews, try to keep it on time. Also try to establish trust before the interview. So you need to be friendly, but also formal in the same time. So you might like contact the interviewee before conducting the interviewees, the interview, you can like send them like the information sheet and ask them to read it. You might maybe have like an initial call with them, just like to give them a brief description about your project and what are they expected to have or to do during the interview. So you can like establish some trust before you conduct the real interview. So try to take for record interview, try to use a recorder and also take notes and listen more than speak. This is very important because when you conduct the interview, the main important or the main aim here is to listen to your participant, to listen to their voice, to their own experiences, not to listen to your voice. So it's very important for you to listen to your participant more than you speak, and try to avoid interrupting them while they are speaking. So put the questions in a straightforward, clear, and not threatening way. Don't lead the question, don't be biased. Try to enjoy the interview, be sensitive to your participant feelings, especially if you are like discussing like sensitive topics, or maybe your participant they already experienced like negative experiences. If you are like researching refugees, they might already experience like bad situations. So try to be like more like considerate while you are asking the questions, and be more like more considerate about like having them maybe feeling or recording like bad feelings. So you need to consider research ethics in this case, and measure your response carefully. So as I mentioned before, you might conduct face-to-face interviews if you are able to. However, you can also use email interviews. So this will help you to access hard to reach population. So maybe your participant, they are like living in very far areas where you couldn't travel to them. So, and it's also less costly. You just like send them email with like a list of questions that they have to answer. So it will save you time for doing the transcription, because the answer they are already written for you. And it will be like kind of like asynchronous interviewing, because you send the questions to them, so they answer you whenever they have the time, and then they send you back the answers. And then like based on those on their answers, you can reflect and you can ask follow-up questions. So both of you, like the researcher and the participant, they can answer at the time that they feel that they are able to answer. And for you, as a researcher, you can do like initial analysis, and based on the questions you ask, you can ask further questions. However, one of the main disadvantages that you will lack the social cues, so you will not be able to see the facial expressions of the participants, which you can use it actually also as a source of data, and you can analyze them as well. Also, the loss of spontaneity. So also they might be like rich data that you will not be able to gather, because like it's not like a real-time interview where you ask a question and then your participant answer you. Also, it will be time consuming, because you have to wait the participant to answer your questions. And then once they return the question or the answers to you, you have to read them, you have to do an initial analysis, then you have to ask them further questions, and they have to answer you. So it will be more time consuming than, for example, face-to-face interviews or synchronous interviews. Sorry, there is also the telephone or online interviews. So this is kind of synchronous interviews, which you can like talk to the participant directly. However, you use the telephone or the online. So the same as the email interviews, you can reach wide geographical areas. Sometimes when it's hard to reach your population, so it's more convenient to use online interviews. You can also ask or discuss sensitive issues, because sometimes like participants, they might feel like hesitant to discuss like sensitive topics while face-to-face. So it might be more encouraging for them like to discuss these topics while on the phone or like social media while you don't see them face-to-face. Also, you might have access to participants in dangerous or politically sensitive sites. For example, in my research, I focus on like conflict zones. That's why I use online interviews. So it gives you like more flexibility in terms of time and place. However, the main disadvantage here that you lose the visual and interpersonal cues that include, for example, head nods and eye gaze. And also like your participant, they need access to high speed internet if you are using like social media or online interviews such as Skype. And they need your participant, they need also to be familiar with online communication. And also withdrawal is very easy with a click of button. I mean, like if they don't enjoy your interview, they just can like close the interview and like disconnect the internet connection. So with the drawer, it's easier. For example, if you are sitting with someone in the same room face to face, I mean, it would be not easier for them to withdraw from your interview. So and what I want you to do now, if you are planning to use interviews as a data collection method, I want you to think about those questions. So how interviews will help you to answer your research questions. Who are your interviewees? What is your sample? What criteria you will use in order to choose your sample or your participant? Where they are based? How you will interview them, online, face-to-face, use email. Who will interview them? You or other researcher? If you are, for example, their employer and you want them like to give honest answers, so then you might not be the right person to ask them if you were their employer. So you might ask someone else to do the interview on behalf of you, and you can train this researcher online or have like pilot or mock interview with this researcher. In which language? In English or in your native language? How many interviewees are you aiming to interview? For how long approximately the interview will last? 1 hour, 2 hours? Will you record the interview? You need here to get, of course, the interviewee's permission to do that. So please try to think about those questions and discuss them and add your answers and notes to the discussion and reflection forum for Unit 2. So this is the end of the interview question. So next lecture, we will discuss the other primary qualitative data collection methods, which include focus group and observation. Thank you.